So the topic for today is maternal influence, and we're looking at this as a way of raising the next generation of change makers. Now, it's very commonly said that if you train a woman, you train a nation. And that in itself is an indication of the links between women or the empowerment of women and education or empowerment of the future generation. So I think it's very commonly thought that there is a close connection between women and the future generation. And most of that comes through maternal influence. A lot of the times when people want to educate children, by extension, they go through the mothers. So it just shows that that's connection, that's bond, that impact which mothers have on young people is very widely recognized. Now, this could be a biological mother, or it could be someone who is a mother figure for a child or a young person. And so, what we're talking about today is really to try and understand what does that mean when we talk about maternal influence, or when we say that mothers have an influence on their children or can impact on their children, on the young people. How does that happen in practical terms? Is it a real thing, or is it just something that we say without any clear evidence for it? The other thing we want to understand is sometimes, as a result of that expectation that mothers can influence their children, and indeed mothers are very much responsible for the actions or inactions of their children, there's also a certain burden that comes with that. And so part of the conversation today will be, how can mothers or people in the position of mothers or who have a maternal influence on children and young people, how can they manage that influence in a way that is healthy for them and also healthy for the children? The other thing we want to understand through this conversation today is every child is different. And by extension, it also means that the ways in which mothers try to influence the children also needs to be different, taking into account the individuality of the children and the young people in their care. So how do we manage that? And of course, is it only female children that mothers can influence, or is there room for mothers to actually influence boys and sons as well? So these are some of the issues that we want to cover in today's conversation. And we would encourage you as well, as we go along, to please feel free to ask your questions, put in your comments, make your suggestions, because we want this to be as interactive as possible. Our panelists would really want to hear from you just as much as they share with you their experiences. So this should be as interactive as possible. And with that, I'm really delighted to introduce the panelists that we have with us today. To start with, we have with us Dr. Monica Service. Dr. Monica identifies as an African Caribbean middle-aged working mother. Her educational career has given her insights into how maternal influences can shape children and young people. And we're really grateful to her for being kind enough to share with us that experience and the expertise that she has in this area with us today. She has been intentional about using her own maternal influence for good, both personally and professionally. And I think that's one of the reasons why she volunteers with AfriKindness as a parents advocate. So we're really delighted to have her with us today, and we look forward to engaging with her. And we're happy to share that her children are healthy, intelligent, and in alignment with their chosen destinies. So we want to hear, Monica, how have you done it? How have you influenced them positively to achieve these very, very much coveted values and position that they find themselves in? Next, we have Dr. Uche Wagba. Dr. Uche is an assistant professor at the Lincoln Alexander School of Law, Toronto Metropolitan University in Canada. Uche has a background in law and human rights, and his work explores how regulatory frameworks shape health systems, not only in the global north, but also in the global south context. He started his research in Nigeria, but he's also had experience of working and studying in Australia and a global perspective on health issues, health law, policy, and human rights, and critical insights on building equitable health systems globally. On the back of that, we're really delighted that Uche is here with us today because he's going to be giving us very good insights into how maternal influence works, also from the perspective of men and boys. And we're looking forward to that conversation with Uche. So thanks for being here. We also have with us Dr. Susie Oyakiri. Susie brings extensive experience in family support services and helping parents navigate educational systems and access the right resources for their children. Susie also has a background in law. She's a lawyer and she's an experienced academic as well. But beyond that, she's also volunteers with AfriKindness as our neurodiversity champion in Leeds. And she specializes in empowering families through advocacy and personalized guidance. So you see, we have a very rich complement of panelists and speakers, and we're very grateful to them for joining us today and being open to share their experiences with us. Thank you. So I think without further ado, we'll call on Monica to get us started with sharing how maternal influences work at various stages of the lives of children and young people. Over to you, Monica.
Thank you, Paddy, and good evening, everyone. It's lovely to have this opportunity to speak with you for a short while on the topic of maternal influences. It's a very short presentation because I am eager to hear what everybody has to say on this topic. But I want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who has joined us, because I find that meetings like these, they help me to be accountable to my mandate, which is to mother my children. And the things that I hear, the things that I'm going to say myself, I'm holding myself accountable to you all as a community. So thank you for joining us. I have three very quick points, and it ranges over three main stages of motherhood. So first stage, where we mother babies or children, and then moving on to when that child becomes a tween or a teen, and then lastly the teen to adulthood stage. And I don't know if the slides are ready, but what the slides will show us is that we can learn from the animal kingdom. There are some things that we can learn from a lioness, from an eagle, and also from spiders. So let's quickly go into the lioness and what we can learn from her. When our children are babies, it's very easy to influence them, but our influence needs to look like protection, care, and teaching them routines. So when we look at the lioness, we see how she protects her cubs. She protects them from the predators, from lions in other prides or other kinds of predators. As mothers, we protect our babies, don't we? We hold them, we care for them, we don't expose them to too much in the elements, germs and so on, when they're very young. But as they grow into sort of childhood and they start to attend school, we need to be careful to also protect them from predatory language. I'm a professional teacher. I have taught for many years, and one of the things that I have heard, unfortunately, is where teachers can have quite predatory language concerning students. And this is where, as mothers, we come in, making sure that we are speaking life to our children, that we are engaging with the schools, being involved in their education and protecting them from negative language, from negative words, because we know that words can have impact. Obviously, we care for our children, our babies, as they're very young. But one of the things that we need to be careful of is um, making sure that we are showing them love in a language that they understand. So many people have heard about love languages. There are five main love languages: touch, gifts, words of affirmation, um, time spent, and acts of service. When we show our children care and love in a way that they receive it, this is a way to actually, we are building influence. We are actually showing them that we care for them, that we love them. And as they get older and as we're going to give them instructions, they're more likely to listen because they know that we're coming from a place of care. Um, I think sometimes we assume that our children know we love them, but the greatest influence that we can have is when we show them care and love in a language that they understand. Lastly, when we're talking about babies and children, is routines. And yes, we know we're supposed to teach them how to do their basic self-care, but we should also focus on psychological self-care, teaching them who they are, teaching them how to look after their mental well-being. Um, um, Something that's really worked practically for me with my children has been one-to-ones. I have three children, and what I try to do is intentionally spend one-to-one time with each of them. So maybe I go out for a walk, maybe I go for a coffee or a hot chocolate with them. And I just spend time teaching them how to communicate, listening to them, getting to know them. And this is something that we have put into our, our lifestyle as a routine, a very important routine. So moving on to the child or teen stage. This is a stage where I find lots of people say, how do we do it? How do we influence our teenager? Well, it starts from the baby stage. Let me start there. But as we get to this stage where they are becoming their own person, it is important for us to learn from the eagle um, about how she mothers her children. Now, one thing about the eagle is very confident in who she is. An eagle knows who they are. They know that they can fly high. So they know the potential that their eaglets have. And they treat them as such. As mothers, it is really good for us to speak and speak to our young people and tell them who they are. Give them a vision of themselves. Give them something to look forward to. But it's important, as I've just said about the eagle, when it comes to her knowing who she is, we should also know who we are. Because when we know what we are capable of, then we know something of what our children, our young people, are also capable of. Giving our children responsibility is something that will help them to transition from a child to a young person. I believe wholeheartedly in family rotas. I think that if you don't have a family and rota in place, you are leaving tasks to, just they're going to happen randomly, and it causes a bit of chaos. When you give children, young people responsibilities, it teaches them, it influences them on how to manage themselves, manage their home, manage their environment well. Lastly, discomfort. And a bit of a weird topic to talk about when we're thinking of influencing our children, our young people. But what the eagle does when her eaglets start to go too big for the nest is that she starts to rip up the nest. She starts to turn the sticks inside so that the nest is uncomfortable. And her eaglets are now wanting to actually leave the nest. This is something that we need to do with our young people. There is no need to manufacture um, crisis or discomfort, because life has difficulties. Our children will encounter difficulties. And when this happens, some of the habits, some of the things that I have found to be useful is that we keep as many things as possible the same. So crisis happens, like somebody in the family passes away, or if divorce happens, or moving house. It is important that we keep the routines as much as possible the same to give our young people stability. So life has thrown discomfort. We are influencing them with our steady, consistent presence. Sometimes it doesn't take a lot of talking, because our children sometimes are tired of hearing us talk. It's just lots and lots of words. Our consistency, keeping things the same, keeping just certain objects the same for them, will help them to get through their crisis without themselves falling apart. They'll be able to hold steady. Lastly, moving on to influencing teens and adults, our young adults. One of the things that I say is that my children are my greatest achievements, my magnum opus. I am very, very grateful to be a mother, and of everything that I will leave to this world, my children is the thing that I am most proud of. I could have written many books and will do. I will do many talks, many presentations, but to think that I have contributed to this world, 3 whole people who are capable of doing so many great things, it helps me to understand it helps me to respect them even as I influence them. One of the things that I understand about young people through my career and in my personal life is that when they feel loved and respected, you're able to reason with them on just about anything. When it comes to modeling excellence, I have found that there are many examples I can think of where mothers are, I would say, a little bit too militant with their children, with their young men, especially. When our children are not doing the things that we would like us to do, we want to go in hard. But one of the things that I have found is that when we lean into our femininity as mothers, it encourages the femininity of our daughters, but it also encourages the masculinity of our sons. And it's a really important point, because we want our young men to grow up to be men of integrity. We want our young women to grow up to be women of integrity. And sometimes we feel like we need to go hard in terms of speaking loudly, shouting, and so on. But a proverb that I live by is that a gentle answer turns away anger. It turns it away. So even though sometimes we are angry, or we find what they are doing to be difficult, trying to calm ourselves down and speaking to them gently is a better way of influencing them than shouting, than being harsh. And this is on the back end of all the different things that we have done with them, the relationship that we have developed with them from when they were babies upwards. Now, lastly, as our young people emerge into society, whether it be by university, work, marriage, or any other way, it's important for us to check in on them. Another pattern that I have seen is that when our young people go to university, especially if they move away, sometimes they fall out of the community. And so it's important to make sure that we check in with them using, video call or left our legacy. We have invested so much into our young people, and we don't want university life to strip away those seeds and the integrity that we have worked so hard to develop in them. Um, I hope that something that I said has helped you. I am going to stop right there because I am really looking forward to hearing some of the other speakers um, and making some notes to see how I can further mother my children. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Monica, for sharing. Very kind of you. I mean, I really enjoyed listening, and I found it interesting how you make the analogy between the different animals, but also the different stages of motherhood or maternal influence. And it almost sounds like each stage requires a slightly different approach. And of course, each child would also require a slightly different approach as well. So it does all sound really interesting. And I find it also insightful the way you ended by talking about or encouraging mothers or people in positions of motherhood or standing in as mothers to sort of lean into their femininity because it's good for the girls, but it's also good for the boys. I found that really interesting because one of the questions on my mind is really how does this work for boys? And so I would like to ask Uche, if that's okay, um, how relevant is maternal influence for boys? And do you agree with Monica's encouragement of mothers to sort of lean into their femininity as something that is actually useful, not just for girls, but also for boys? Or do you think that mothers should maybe shy away from influencing their boys? What do you think?
Okay, thank you very much. Delighted to be part of this conversation and as an ally as well. And I quite enjoyed Monica's presentation. It was very enlightening for me, so very grateful. Now, to your question, Perry, there is indeed a lot of relevance for maternal influence in terms of the life of their boys. There are several ways that maternal influence will work for boys, but I want to focus on one specific area, and I think Monica's talk was really about that, and that is this idea of identity formation. Um, a major problem we have in our society today is how people construct their identity, how kids construct their identity. There is an identity crisis currently going on, and there are several factors that can be blamed for this crisis. But I think a very key foundational aspect of this crisis can be linked to the family dynamics, you know, particularly the relationship, speaking about the boy child, particularly the relationship that the boy child has with their mom. And so this idea of identity formation, okay, zeroing in on the identity of boys, their masculine identity, or this idea of masculinity, is something that, we need to speak a bit about. Masculinity here is, I would define that as a pattern of practice by which people, more especially men or boys, engage that position of masculinity. What does it mean to be, a man, or what does it mean to be a boy child, or what does it mean to be masculine? There are multiple forms of masculinity that are out there. We should quickly put that out so that we don't think that there's only one form of masculinity that can be engaged. Much of this conversation is very sort of culturally contextualized. So there are cultural contexts to this, and also context-specific aspects to this. Some forms of masculinity are more honored or more regarded than others, and some are actively or socially marginalized. For example, the masculinity of disempowered ethnic minorities, for example, does not weigh highly as that of the more dominant um, ethnic groups. And so that recognition obviously means that mothers have a role to play in terms of the construction of the identity of their boy child, in terms of what it means to be masculine. Um, in this regard, I would say that, where mothers have a very important contribution to make is to balance out some of the more sort of negative stereotypes about what it means to be a man, that comes out from the way boys are trained. You know, um, you see in our society, in some societies where violence or being tough, not being vulnerable, not showing any weakness is promoted as what it means to be a man. You hear common things like, why are you crying? Be a man. So it means that as a man you shouldn't cry, you shouldn't show any weakness. But then the influence of a mother can cancel out those sort of stereotypes, because um, mothers have this ability to bring their boys in touch with, you know, um, attributes that are more sort of grounded in more other values or other considerations, rather than being portrayed as tough. And of course, obviously, I'm generalizing here. This is not to say that every woman is necessarily always very feminine in approach. Some women are actually more, masculine than their partners. And so, but then there is there are countless studies out there that tend to show that, boys that have the presence of their mothers in their lives in terms of their upbringing, they are more grounded. They are more able to engage, for example, in the boy-girl dynamics, relationship dynamics. Boys that don't have that feminine touch, they, there's always this thing that is missing in their lives when they are engaging with girls, as an example. And so, I think that to your question, should mothers shy away from influencing their sons? No, absolutely not. Mothers have a very significant role to play in influencing their sons. A boy child without the influence of the mother is missing a very critical component of development. As we have listened to Monica's talk, you can see that there is an intentionality to mothering and to motherhood that, if stripped out of the boy child, makes the child to be an incomplete person. And so let me just stop here and listen and allow other commentators to speak.
Thank you so much for that, Uche. And I think what you've said really reinforces the presentation from Monica. So it is good to hear. And based on your experiences, I really like the point you made about the cultural context, and the fact that all of these conversations, we need to bear in mind that cultural context. And in a sense, I almost also want to add that it then means perhaps that even mothers, in relation to the boys, shouldn't be saying be a man, because what does that mean when you say be a man? And perhaps mothers shouldn't also, in addition to being open to influencing their sons and the boys in their care, should also not shy away from watching the boys sort of own that softer side of themselves, because ultimately that's what makes for a rounded person. At least that's one thing I've picked from what you both said. So thanks a lot for sharing. I'll move the conversation to Susie. And I just want to hear the other side, Susie, because Uchi has shared his experience as a man, and I guess he's also reflected on his experiences growing up as a boy and relationships with mom. So for you, I have the cheats because I know that Susie Susie has grown up as a girl with boys around. So reflecting on your experience growing up with boys at home, having your brothers, to what extent would you say that maternal influence has impacted on different stages of your development, and perhaps also reflecting on the um, relationship or experiences of your brothers as well? What would you say is the difference? And the other thing I want you to reflect on is, I mean, you're an adult now, and one of the things that is sometimes tricky is that balance, you know. Monica showed us the different stages. So, would you say that those stages resonate with your experiences, and has it been the same? I mean, sometimes I remember growing up when they would say, "Oh, these things we're telling you now you won't understand, but when you become older you'll understand what we're trying to do." So moms are always, well, not always, but the
Not okay.
stereotype of, you know, the African mom, they always come up with this thing of, I'm telling you now it's for your own good, but you're not seeing it. Don't worry, when you grow up you will see where I'm coming from. And I can see Monica smiling because perhaps Monica has been saying that to her children as well.
all the
So
time.
what do you think? What do you think, Susie?
Okay, thanks for that question. But first, I'm happy, delighted to be part of the conversation. And of course, there's no other way to respond to you than to bring in personal experience about it, because it's true that I grew up in a home with boys and I had a very present mother. So the topic is very resonates with me in that sense. And I would say yes to most of the things that, in short, everything that Monica has said, and it also ties in with what Uche has said. And I think one of the first things in my early, I'll say, childhood and teenage years, which has also shaped me in adulthood, is the fact that I grew up in a home where there were, in terms of chores that had to be done, okay? Equal chore distribution. So in terms of household responsibilities, and so when Monica was talking about routines and responsibility, in terms of household responsibilities, for example, these were shared based on age and maturity, okay, and not necessarily gender. So the practical application of this to me was that it kind of triggered early enough the sense of capacity. So task were not gendered, but had to be done based on capacity. And I think it actually influences me now in terms of when I'm assigning things in my capacity as auntie, friend, lecturer, or whatever role I'm playing in life. I recognize that it may not be a male or female thing, but had to do with the capacity to actually do the task. And what was interesting was that even then, there was still a way she was able to get us to hone in on the peculiarities of the other gender, kind of, without making it a thing of, oh, you're a woman and this task or responsibilities should be yours, or these are boys and this should be their task. It was just, at this age, this is what I think you can do. You are mature enough to do XYZ. And so capacity is what I would say I brought or I learned at an early age. Okay. And then there was discipline. My mother was a teacher. She was an Igbo woman at that time in the 80s. There was the stereotype, or there was an expectation of how the home should be run. But one thing that I learned early was unbiased discipline. So you do the crime and you do the time. And even before I became a lawyer and learned about punishment and necessity and all of those things that come up with how the crime should fit, it was something that was already happening. Okay. And so I learned fairness from that. And so discipline was administered or given to everyone, regardless of gender. Okay. And you may be flogged by age, or someone like me, I was very thin. So based on body size, I would get the punishment that fitted my stature. But what it taught me was fairness. Okay. Early enough, I learned fairness. So there was nothing like, oh, you are the girl and this is the boy. You were all children who have done something, and the one who didn't do anything wrong was rewarded for being a good child. And so early enough, the whole idea of what fairness meant is something that I learned from maternal influence, so to speak. And then I would say something that was very key, and I think is very important in ethnic minority homes, African homes, Igbo homes, whatever it is trying to subvert the cultural expectations. Okay, particularly in terms of what male children should study or what female children should study. Okay, so I'm a lawyer, my sister is a lawyer, and if I wanted to be an engineer, if I had a capacity, again, tying down to the capacity, I could have been an engineer. Okay, so one thing she did was, by my mom's actions, she kind of modified prevailing cultural stereotypes. At the time we were growing up, boys had to be engineers, boys had to be doctors, girls had to be teachers, girls had to be nurses. And so all of those things were in things that my mom keyed into. And early enough, I knew that if I could read medicine, then I would read medicine. Okay. And she not only said it, she acted it in the way she modeled us in. She was a teacher, so it was maybe quite easy for them. They had the training to know that anyone could be anything. So early enough, I learned equality from that singular act, that you could study anything regardless of your gender. Okay. And if you, as the female child, you wanted to be the president, you had her support. So I knew that early enough. But one of the things she did was to make sure that we all knew, or I knew, and my siblings knew, that we had to do the work. Okay, so you had to work hard to get whatever it is that you want to do. But in terms of that cultural stereotype of this is what a boy should do or this is what a girl should do, maternal influence from my mom was such that it's it wasn't a thing. Actually, I would say it's when I left home that I actually was exposed to most of these cultural things. And maybe it was a shock, but the fact is that that kind of imbibed in the way I interact with people and hold on to principles such as equality. So in terms of long-term impact, I would say maternal influence from childhood to early teenage years to adulthood, kind of summarize, if I'm summarizing what I learned in terms of growing up with boys, was to make sure that I understood that there was something called equality regardless of gender. Okay, and this was in terms of like I said, equal chores, distribution, there was capacity, there was fairness, and more importantly, accountability. Okay, so whether you are a boy child, whether you're a girl child, you just had to be accountable, and probably you had to take responsibility. I think that's what I was going to say. And that has influenced me up till now, and may not be so good, but I kind of tend to hold people accountable for things that they do. And even if it's the deadline that you haven't met, you will be held kind of accountable. So let me just stop here.
So thank you very much for that, Susie. Just listening to you, I mean, one of the main things I've taken out of this is the ways in which that's the wider implications of maternal influence occur, and not only in the present, but also it's almost follows the child, through different phases. And it's interesting because what happens at that childhood stage or teenage stage doesn't necessarily end there, but could also have implications for the life of that child and their future experiences when they become adults and they go into the wider society. So that's really interesting. And the way in which just the experiences you were having at home shaped your understanding of equality and perhaps your interactions with people outside the home, even now, is quite telling. And I think it's a reminder to all of us that in dealing with the children or young people in our care, we have to be mindful, because it doesn't end with them and it doesn't end with just that moment. So it may not be advisable to just take the easy option or do the like toe the line of least resistance just to make the conversation short and just go have your rest, because actually that could shape that young person's future outlook and their relationships with other people as they become adults. So that's really, really insightful. Thanks for sharing. Now, one of the things I was thinking about is it's not uncommon. I mean, it's nice to think that mothers will always have good influence on their children. But I want to think that there may be times when it's not as straightforward as we would want it to be. I remember once, and this is a very popular character on YouTube, and I was really shocked when someone said, "Oh, the mom had been in prison for whatever some years back." But of course, now the child is, I think that child, when I first saw the child on YouTube, they were a child, like proper child. But I think now they're a teenager, maybe becoming a young adult because it's been a few years now. But I found it really inspiring that whatever experience she had, which ended up landing her in prison, she was able to come out of it. And as a family, they remained together and were able to bring this child up, and the child had become a global figure, doing great things, influencing other children. So it didn't, for me, I just felt that didn't define motherhood for her, and she was still able to turn her life around, support her family in a very positive way. So on the back of that, my question and the thing I want us to reflect on is, in situations where perhaps the relationship isn't as positive, whether because of the mother's personal struggles or the circumstances surrounding the family's situation in that moment, if we have mothers who feel like they're not there, they're not being a positive influence, they're not being the eagle, they're not being the nurturer the way they would want to be, what would be your advice for those mothers, and how can they try and turn things around and repair that relationship with the children or the young people in their care so that they can exert that positive influence which we're talking about this evening? And anyone could go for it, whoever would like to start.
I'll start if that's okay. I think two things come to mind. The first is that I think we as mothers, maternal figures, need to realize that not every mother has been mothered well. And so they would need to do the work on themselves first. There would need to be some self-care done, whether it be therapy, whether it be just taking time out and getting to know themselves as a person. And then I think once they have come to a place where they are stable enough to be a positive influence on and hopefully we're talking about adult children, if they're at a place where they are stable enough, then own their mistakes and apologize. Because I think then they will be at a good place to be able to do better going forward. So work on themselves first, and then own their mistake, apologize, and do better.
Thank you very much for that, Monica. I think just putting on my lawyer hat, it just reminds me you can't give what you don't have, right? So that really resonates with what you've just said. The fact that as mothers, and indeed as parents, we would very often parent from what we know, from the experiences we've had. And that is not necessarily good. Sometimes it's a mixed bag, good, bad, ugly, all of it comes together. And I guess this is a call to action to say we need to be intentional and reflect on, as adults who are in charge of children, whether as their parents or guardians, reflect on the reasons for which we do things the way we do. and perhaps try and explore whether this is on the back of the experiences we've had as children and young people, and then also reflect if we didn't enjoy those experiences, what it could be doing to the young people that we're replicating the same for, and interrogate that process. At Africanus, one of the things we offer is a training on purposeful parenting. And it's precisely for this reason that we do purposeful parenting training, because we want to take parents on that journey of self reflection, thinking about where they are, how they've come to be there, and what impacts their actions or inactions are having on children and young people in their care, and where they need to reinforce, support them with that reinforcement process, but where they need to rethink, unlearn, and relearn, also support them through that process. So thanks a lot for sharing those. And I guess the other thing I picked out of what you said, Monica, is we shouldn't feel guilty about it. So if a mother is in a situation where she feels like she could do better, it's not the end of the world. But instead, there's an opportunity to reflect, learn. There's so many resources out there and organizations that could support us through that process, engage with the resources and the supports available. And also, I really liked when you say apologize, because I think culturally, at least where I come from, it's it used to be unheard of that an adult would apologize to the children. And I think growing up, the apology used to be when they give you something, they give you, I don't know, something sweet, toys.
Yeah.
Okay, come here, and you're like, is that your way of saying sorry? But I think the times have changed, and one of the things that is a bit more acceptable now is that adults can actually apologize to children, because if you think about it, we're mirroring positive behavior, right? So if we're saying to children and young people, if you've done something wrong, or if you've hurt someone, you should apologize to the person. What's better way to teach them than to actually mirror that behavior and apologize to them when we know that we've done something that hasn't gone well, whether for them or for the family. So thanks for sharing that. I don't know if any of the other panelists wants to weigh in on that question.
I think I'll just add, and maybe this already sort of is evident in the conversation so far, that this idea of accountability, obviously, taking responsibility of being accountable. When you want the kids to be accountable, you too should, as a parent or as a mom, you should also be accountable to the kids, and that is important because kids are learning as you're modeling accountability, what it means to be accountable. If you don't take responsibility for your actions, you do something wrong and you don't take responsibility, you expect the kids to, take responsibility, then there's no example for them to do so. Our parents will always tell us, I don't know, growing up, every parent I knew was always coming top in their class. They always were the best in the school. No parent has ever told the kids that I was very terrible as a student. So that is a culture of not taking accountability, not being accountable for your shortcomings. Recognizing that school was hard and I made mistakes, so don't be like me. Parents will say that. They will always say, no, be like me. I was always the best. But we don't get to see that, So, yeah, just I wanted to add.
No, thank you very much. And I think that's an example that really resonates, because I can see, people nodding. But in my case, I'll tell you what, my parents actually kept the results to show me. So there was evidence to back up whatever they were saying. But it's a very important point you made, because one of the things I was reflecting on is also the fact that we've talked a lot about accountability and sort of taking responsibility for the things we do. But there's one example that I really enjoyed growing up. So one thing my parents used to do, and my mom, would be that if they were going out, they'll tell you, this is where I'm going and this is what I'm going to do. So it never really occurred to me that it was a thing. So naturally, growing up as an adult, got to university, I would always tell whoever I was with, oh, this is where I'm going and this is what I'm going to do. But then the first time I understood that it was actually a thing was when somebody was going out and I said, Okay, so where are you going? I just asked as a matter of course, like that's what you do. You tell people where you're going and what you're going to do, who you're going to meet, just so that we know, not because we're coming after you or we want to pry. It's just normal. And the response I got actually told me that, no, you shouldn't ask that question. So for me, it was normalized again because it was a behavior that had been shown to me. It didn't matter that I was a child. They would just say, this is what it is. And that just made me pick it up naturally. So it just, another practical example of the accountability isn't always, I've done something wrong, I'm sorry. But it's also, if you're asking the child to share, to be open, to not keep secrets, then by extension, it means that as a mom, you have to share, you have to be open, and you have to not keep secrets. Another example is with the phones. So, I mean, if you're saying you can't have your phone after 8 p.m., fine, you're the adult. But I think by extension, it then means at about 8 p.m., you also have to just drop the phone just to reinforce that message, you know. And of course, that's not to say when they go to bed, you don't go pick up the phone again, but at least for that period when they're there, you're just mirroring the behavior. So I think the accountability goes both ways, both in terms of what not to do, but also in terms of what to do. I just thought to mention that. Thank you very much. And to our audience, I hope you've been enjoying the conversation. Please feel free to send in your comments, questions, suggestions. I see a question here. Thanks for sharing that question with us. I'll read it out to the panelists. Thanks to the excellent speakers for this enlightening session. How can parents establish a balanced outlook for fairness, gender equality, and self awareness and accountability for children in the home in recent times? And any of the speakers can answer this question. I think it's really asking, considering the wider society, and I mean, a lot of you panelist speakers have mentioned cultural context, cultural context. So clearly, sometimes there might be tensions between the culture at home and the wider culture. So I think this question is really asking, as a mom, as a parent, how do you strike that balance between the culture at home and what's going on out there in terms of fairness, gender equality, self-awareness, and accountability?
Okay, so I think I can try and start this. When we talk of gender equality, at least from what I understand, I don't think it means erode the uniqueness of both genders. Okay, so it's recognizing that this is a boy child, okay, this is a son, this is a daughter, but that um, they are both special, so to speak. And I think the easiest way or to answer it when we're looking at equality is to think about favoritism, okay? And so even if you're not going to put it within a cultural thing, just favoring one child, but making it look like it's because they are male, because in our culture, male children have this uniqueness, may be a problem. So just recognizing that all the children are special and probably explaining why, if you've given preferential treatment to one child, that this is the reason, okay? It's not because they are boys or because they are girls, but because of something about that particular child that requires that extra. So it may even be because of their gender, for example, and it may just be something as simple as your sister is going through her period at this time and she may not be able to walk, explaining it in terms, so she can't do this, she can't do the laundry at this time because she's experiencing menstrual pain, not because she's a girl and should not be overburdened, or the boy should not do this thing because he's a boy, shouldn't be seen in the kitchen frying plantain. He can't do it now because he's unable, oil is so risky, he can hurt himself at this age. Something like that seems fair, and it's taken out of because they are boys or because they are girls. Okay, so it's not to erode the fact, and there are times that a task could just be unique because it's I mean, no matter how my brothers cook, my sister is the cook. She cooks very well because she brings in a special touch. It's not to say that there are no sons who do that, but it could just be your egusi is better. Like, we want to eat egusi today, but your sister's egusi is the sweetest. And so you are bringing in a balance, fairness, giving tax, but making the explanation something that is outside of they are more special than you. Okay, so I think I'll just stop there. I hope it helps.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So, explaining the reasons for which we do things. And I think that's a very important point because, again, from a cultural perspective, if I reflect on my culture growing up, sometimes what you find is that the mom, the dad, the parents, and I'm saying parents now because it's not only mothers who do it, even though we're talking about mothers today, this thing of not providing a reason, just do it because I say so. And you know how children and young people are very impressionable. So sometimes, perhaps there's a valid reason, like Susie's mentioned, maybe the sister's going through menstrual cramps and she's unwell. And then even the secrecy around it, we don't want to tell other people that that's what she's going through. So we just say, no, you go and do it because you're the boy, just do it, you know? So trying to, it could happen in two ways. It's either we don't give the reason and the children assume, rightly or wrongly, or we just give the easy reason, which reinforces maybe the stereotypes and the biases, which again, it's just as bad. So, picking up from what Susie has said, I think the lesson there, for me at least, is give an objective reason. And I guess that means you have to reflect yourself as the mom and be sure that that reason is objective and is not leaning into the stereotypes around whether it's gender or any other negative stereotypes and prejudices. So we need to be objective and we need to also provide a very clear explanation when we say this child do this or the other child do that. Because again, that's another way of, I think, reinforcing accountability in a sense. That's thinking about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and providing that reason to the child or the young person. We're also teaching them to be reflective and to also provide objective reasons for the things that they do. So thanks for sharing that. Would anyone else want to weigh in on that question, please?
Let me jump in here. I think it is very important as mothers, parents, to also pay attention and recognize the significance of the moment that in those interactions you're having with your kids, you're constructing. I go back to what I was saying earlier about identity. You're constructing their identity. You're constructing their imaginations. Today, I recall. I mean, my mom is late, but I recall a lot of things about, things she did, things she said, how she said them. And so those interactions that you're having with the kids are things that they would latch onto, in the future to construct their sense of what is the appropriate response to a particular situation. You say, when we were young, my parents used to say, or my mom used to say this. And there's a sort of there's a dogmatic or kind of normative, effect to that statement of what my parents did or what my parents said that seems to construct their understanding of their own lived reality or their lived experience. An experience that is not easily, an experience that is not easily deconstructed when they're now expected as adults to, formulate their own approach to things. So in that sense, it means that there is an invitation for parents to be very, very, for mothers especially, to be very intentional about these things. There has to be some sort of intentionality to those interactions with your kids, knowing that, okay, this kid is asking so many questions because they are this phase in life where they are very, they are very inquisitive. They are full of questions. They want to know about things. And so I won't be flippant. I won't give them flippant responses because those flippant responses are being recorded. And that is going to form their understanding. It's going to formulate their understanding of what is the norm about this situation. So if I'm being flippant in my response, or if I'm being flippant in the way I'm treating the kids, then they're gonna grow up with this impression that it doesn't really matter, that it's not consequential. But if every moment, kid is asking you're engaging with the kid, you see it as a teaching moment. You try to engage with them, not as individuals who are subhuman and are unable to understand the mysteries of being a human, but as essentially individuals with identities and opinions and impressions of their own, and then you're trying to engage with them on that basis. First of all, it conveys to them a sense of responsibility. It conveys to them a sense of agency, the fact that you see them as very, fully formed, independent thinking beings who are capable of appreciating and engaging with the situations. And then, of course, obviously, you're treating them in a way that suggests to them that this is how you treat others. You extend to them that courtesy, that sort of agency that you expect them to extend to you. And to my mind, that is a very significant way to respond to and responding to the question that was asked, how do you prepare your kids, or how do you position them in the light of all of the things that are happening externally? You need to engage with them, and teach them to be able to engage rather than avoid, because avoiding doesn't really solve the problem, or being flippant about it doesn't really solve the problem.
And can I just add something to that? I think just to reiterate what both Susie and Uche have said, something I say to my children all the time is that wars are won or lost because of communication. That will resonate in their minds until the end of their days, because I say all the time, wars are won or lost because of communication. And I've taught them, or I've tried to teach them how to communicate about anything, absolutely anything, because if we are not speaking to them about topics, somebody's going to teach them. And I think the last thing that I will say very quickly is I have learned to be humble when it comes to my children, because they know a lot more than we give them credit for. And so I have learned a lot from my children about all the topics mentioned in the question. And even though I grew up in a very conservative environment, and so I had some very conservative views. But just in conversation with my children, some of my views have changed. And so it's to be humble enough to listen to them and to change my mind, not completely, but to change it, based upon what they're saying, just to be open to discuss and to listen to their points of view. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I think I couldn't possibly disagree with that. And it's interesting because for me, there's so much I'm learning from children, because especially when it comes to technology and what's going on out there, because they know so much, and it's even in our best interest as adults, as mothers, to understand what they know.
Yes.
Because then you're better equipped to engage with them. Because truth be told, not every information out there is right or is proper or is correct. But if we don't engage, like our partners have said, Uche, Susie, Monica, if we don't engage, then we never really know what they know. And sometimes I see young people, they have this thing where they're just looking at you like, you don't know what we know. So as much as possible, we want to get into that conversation and have them speak to us, have them tell us what they know, so that if it's something that doesn't align with those values we're trying to instill in the home, as the question was asked, we can start that process of unlearning, relearning together. And I think, again, that's modeling the behavior we want to see. If children and young people see that as mothers are interested in learning from them, chances are that they would also want to learn from the mothers or the adults they're working with. I remember my supervisor, all those many years ago, she used to say, I'm going to teach you something, but you have to teach me something back. And as far as she was concerned, those were the rules of engagement. So I'll teach you something, but you have to teach me something back. And that was very fundamental for me because a lot has been said this evening about agency. It meant that when I was going into the meetings with her, in my mind, I was thinking, what can I teach her today? Anything, but I had to think. I was like, oh, what can I teach her today? And it used to be really exciting because this was somebody who, I mean, worlds apart in terms of her expertise, experience. But it just made me feel like she wants to hear from me. She wants to learn something. And the truth about it is, actually, I would come out of those meetings and I had taught her something based on what I knew, So I can imagine just reflecting on today's conversation. If I went into a conversation with a young person with that mindset and I was saying to them, oh, you need to teach me something, it would be so empowering for them. Because as far as they're concerned, one, I want to listen. And two, they would have to think, what can I teach today? And I think if they also know that it's not a case of I'm talking down at them, but it's a case of I'm teaching, I'm sharing, I also want to learn from them, they would perhaps be a bit more open and willing to engage in that process. So that's something that, I mean, personally for me, I'll be taking away from this. It's something that I do almost not in I wouldn't say I do it intentionally. It's just something that I do, but I think going forward I'll be a bit more intentional about it to say, okay, I want to learn something from you and then I'll teach you something back, because I think that would help in the conversation and the process and just building trust as well in that relationship. So thank you so much for sharing. I'm looking to see if we have other questions. I don't see any other questions. Have I missed anything? Oh, yes. There's a question here. Thank you to all the speakers and thank you to everyone for these questions. Really appreciate it. Thank you to all the speakers. It's been very enlightening. Can a mother's stress or anxiety negatively affect a child's emotional growth? And that's a question that has been on my mind. I'll just add something to it, which is also all of these conversations about maternal influence. Could it really translate into anxiety on mothers? And how can that process be managed? So, two sides to the question. On the one hand, how can mothers or people in position of being mothers or in charge of children and young people, how can they manage these expectations of their influence so that it doesn't become anxiety for them? And can a mother's stress or anxiety, whether as a result of the expectations of motherhood or just life happening, can it negatively affect a child's emotional growth? Anyone wants to weigh in?
Okay, I'll say definitely. I mean, the environment. Okay, so the mothers in the home we are usually tasked or identified as nurturers, at least in the home. Okay, even though it's a gendered thing, but it's what it is from their unique personalities. Okay, and so if you have a mother who is anxious, who is snapping, just think about it. You don't want to be around someone who's doing that, even if it's your pair. Okay, and so your mom is seen as someone that you should, I mean, I'm talking of on all things being equal, because we recognize that it's not in every home that the mother plays this role. But just imagine that you have this expectation of nurture from your mom and she's anxious and snapping. Definitely it's going to impact on you in two ways. You want to avoid, okay, that environment, or you find yourself not wanting to contribute to whatever it is that is going on with her. Okay, and so it becomes a problem because you may have something you actually do want to talk about that is bothering you, but suddenly you are becoming the adult who is thinking about, I do not want to add up to mommy's stress. And it's usually, I would say, it's linked to that expectation, okay, that while mommy is XYZ, I want to be the good child, or I want to be the understanding because she has taught me that, oh, there should be fairness and all of that. But it's not also to say that mothers should be superhuman. I think it goes on to what Monica had said earlier about getting professional help. So it may just be, I watched a video on Instagram where it looked interesting, but it was, mommy, you're always shouting. Okay. I know that in our generation, you're always shouting could give you an actual knock. But I feel like even in my time, we found a way to communicate. And one of it was actually just giving you space to, live in your environment, because we do not want to be beaten because you're anxious. Okay, so I'm talking personally now. Or you don't even want to be given work to do because your mother suddenly thinks you're idle because you're disturbing her. So there's that whole thing. One of it will be for you to become anxious yourself because you feel responsible, or you actually just avoid the the environment because it's not one. You're expecting an environment of nurture, but you're getting one that you don't even understand if you are responsible for it. I don't know if it answers the question, but in such situation, I would say mothers, at least in that time, if they've gone to church, at least I knew if my mother goes to evening mass and come back, there can be some peace. So find whatever it is that takes you out of that environment. Now we're talking about professional services, counselors. It wasn't a thing. If you had gone to a counselor in that time, it would even stigmatize you. But there were ways that mothers found. They'll go for zonal meeting, they'll go for village meeting. But the point is, to help yourself, you need to find a space to unwind. You have to go somewhere. You may not have the luxury of going to the picnic or something, but it may just be simple as calling that friend that makes you laugh, or that will take you back into how you used to be a young girl, and just help to detox whatever it is to create a better environment for the children.
No, thank you very much for that, Susie. Before I see if the other panelists want to speak, I'll just say that that's a very important point, the self-care. And on our parent resource page, we actually have resources on self-care, not just for mothers, but for parents, because this is something that is very critical. Because as Susie has said, if a mother is anxious, not only will it affect her, but it would also affect the children and young people around her, because it's either they avoid or they could even learn that behavior because they might just think that that's the way to react to things. So it's really important that mothers do not allow this become a burden. And also, if you're feeling that stress or anxiety, then please seek support and the different ways of doing this. And there's no stigma around seeking support for anxiety or stress or even mental health challenges. The services are there, the support is there. Take advantage of it because you need to be your best self. You need to be in a good position yourself to be able to do any of all this nurturing talk. Because if you're not healthy, if you're not happy, if you're not at peace, then you can't possibly provide that succor or nurture for those around you. So thanks for that, Susie. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that question?
Just to add very quickly, or to add to what Susie has said, the mothers have, I use a metaphor of temperature. Mothers have this ability to determine the temperature of the house. Whether or not it is warm, hospitable, accommodating, or whether or not it is off-putting for the kids, and that probably links well to what Susie was saying. And so anxieties, when mothers display their anxieties in a way that is very visible and in a way that is, of course, there are situations that can justify obviously being anxious. I'm not talking about those instances where there's something happening where you're anxious as a mom, but I'm talking about a tendency where you're prone to just respond with anxiety to things. Kids then walk away with this impression that, oh no, don't tell mom because she's gonna start acting up or something like that. You want to avoid that. You want to avoid being that parent that would your kids will not feel comfortable sharing with you or just sort of letting you in on things that are happening because you're going to respond and they can't predict how you're going to respond. And then to the other the flip side of the question, which you framed, you said, what does that mean for obviously these expectations about, the roles, the nurturing role, and all of that moms have to play. I think it's about the perspective, the way you look at this. Everything and every endeavor you engage in has, the weight of responsibility to it. It's about how you interpret, what you're doing and what you're seeking to accomplish. Because whether or not you think about it, you're actually doing everything. Everything you do is quite consequential for the kid. So just even living your daily life is quite a consequential act. So when you think about it that way, it means that you're not being called upon to do something that is extraordinarily different from what you would normally do. You're just being called upon to give a bit of thought to it. It's just like when you're engaging with your friends. Sometimes you make a very conscious decision to practice kindness with your friends, isn't it? Like you make a thought to say, you know what, I'm going to compliment them on the way they look, or I'm gonna say thank you if they do something for me. I'm not just, there's an intentionality you put into that communication with your friends, which has a way of conveying your humanity to them and makes them, makes them very happy or feel valued in that sense. So what I'm saying in other words is that as a mom, yes, what you're being called upon to, that whole responsibility of being a mom is a very huge one, but it is not any different to what you're doing on a day-to-day. Like there's nothing extraordinary beyond what you're doing on a day-to-day. So what you're saying is that just think about it, reflect on it. When I was doing my doctorate, one of the conversations I had in one of those writing classes was about reflexivity, where you need to sit down and reflect, reflective writing. That was something I was not used to where I was coming from. But then I was then being told that I need to value the process of thinking about my process, thinking about what I'm doing. And I found that very difficult, because, the culture where I was coming from, you should just know because you know it, But, then I was being told that you don't just know it. Like there's a process, there's a reflexivity to it. So in other words, you should be reflective about it, to put it in another way.
Thank you so much for that. And I think that is a relief. I mean, for me, I agree with you the way you've put it in the sense that it's happening anyway, whether you're thinking about it or not. This is just an invitation to say, think about it and be intentional in the way you go about the process. So thanks for that. There's a question here which kind of links with what you mentioned, and I'll ask Monica because I'm just mindful of the time. I'll ask Monica to see what she thinks. And once Monica's done with this question, we'll just have your final words for the panelists and then we'll draw the conversation to a close. Thanks to the guest who sent this question. Good evening, and thanks to the amazing speakers. How can a mother show appreciation and encourage one child who is doing well without making the other child or children feel less loved? I've put you on the spot, Monica.
That is a very good question. And I think if I relate it back to what I try to do is I try to show appreciation to my children regularly. So there is a culture of showing appreciation in the home. They have always known that I do not value academics over spirituality. If you are being kind, that is something that I will appreciate them for. So when it comes to somebody, so if someone, for instance, has produced a very good piece of academic work, I encourage all of us. We appreciate and we congratulate them together. So it's a culture that if you win, we all win. I think if we can foster that, then, them looking at a sibling, if one of our children see a sibling achieving, there's no jealousy there because they take it as their own achievement as well. I think if we can foster that in our children from very young, they will grow up with that, and it will be quite easy to see one achieving in a particular area at a particular time, and to congratulate them without animosity.
No,
I hope
thank you
that
very
started the
much.
conversation.
No, I think that's a brilliant response. I really like what you said about not valuing one thing over the other. And just reflecting on my own childhood, I think it was clear what the parents liked. So I could tell the kinds of things that would impress my mom. And by extension, I'm just thinking it then means that if I wasn't good at those things that would impress my mom and I was doing other things, then perhaps I could tell that, oh, she wouldn't be as happy as if another child was doing something that she really is into and she would commend the person. So for me, the lesson, just listening, reflecting on what you've said, Monica, is we need to diversify our interests as well as mothers. So there's the one thing I really like, but I have to learn to like other things as well, taking into account the strengths and the relative weaknesses of the children, because every child and young person is different. One of them may be really into music, one of them may be really into, I don't know, academics, like you said, spirituality, whatever. But as a mom, part of what you need to be thinking about is how do I nurture each of those children from their areas of strength and perhaps take the conversation forward to say, okay, you're so good at this. How do you teach all of us? So that at least we'll learn from you. And you're so good at the other thing. How do you teach all of us? And so each of them would feel valued in that way because they are sharing what they know, what they're good at, and we're appreciating them for it. Thanks, Monica. Any final words, Uche?
I, I have been very much enriched being a part of this panel and listening to all the other speakers. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity that you guys have provided me through this platform to engage in these very stimulating conversations about parenthood and motherhood. It makes me it's quite a sentimental conversation to be having. From it. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Susie.
Thank you. But I think in terms of my final words, would just be to reiterate the Africanness theme about the History Month for Women, which is empowered women raise empowered generations. I know this because an empowered mother who raised myself and my siblings. So an empowered mother raised empowered generation. So just to reiterate that it's very important. And thank you for the opportunity to join in the conversations as well.
Thank you so much. It's been a delight for me having all of you here. And thanks to our audience for the questions as well, for engaging with the conversations. It's been a really, really good experience. We're going to put up the slides on the parents page, which we maintain on our website. And we would really want to get your feedback on how today's session has gone. We'll invite you to engage with the survey. I think we can put up the slide with the survey QR code. Yeah. So please, if you just scan the QR code, and then you could also just click on the link if you have access to it. Would really want to hear from you because it's your feedback that allows us tailor our programs to better suit your needs, your interests. So please engage with that and share your survey feedback with us from this session. And if there are topics you want us to cover in subsequent months, let us know as well, and we'll try to engage with those topics, get panelists who can speak to us on those topics, and invite you to be part of the conversation as well. The other thing I've mentioned is the parent resource page, and there are lots of things we've talked about today which resonate with not only today's conversation, but even conversations from previously. So like I mentioned, we have parent resources on self-care. We have resources on mental health and ensuring that you're protecting your mental health, but also the mental health of children. We have resources from partner organizations who are really experienced in supporting children and young people to cope with mental health challenges. We're able to signpost to relevant services. We also have resources on things like purposeful parenting, like I mentioned previously, because that's an area of focus for us. And we have a full module that deals with that. So all of these resources are available on the parents resource page for free. So please follow the QR code or the link, and you can access all of these resources for free. If you have any questions or require any further information or signposting, let us know, and we'll be more than happy to provide the necessary and required support. The other thing I want to mention is that we have a research team as part of AfriKindness. So everything we do, we want it to be evidence based. And one of the things we're doing at the moment through our research team is a study that's looking into understanding how Black African children are supported with their racial identities at home, but also within the community. So our panelists this evening spoke about the ways in which maternal influences affect identity formation for children and young people. So this survey is really to understand from the perspective of parents, but also from the perspective of children and young people, the issues, the challenges around racial identities formation within the home, and the ways in which that interacts with the wider society, especially for children who are of school age, the ways in which it reflects on their experiences in schools or their experiences in the wider society. So we'd encourage you to please take part in this survey wherever you are, whether you have children or not, whether you live in the UK or not, but we're very focused on just understanding the experiences of racial identity. So if you look through, it's a very short survey, and you'll see that the questions are really accessible, and would like to hear your views on this. We also want to let you know that we have a training that's coming up for culturally responsive neurodiversity awareness. And this training is targeted at community leaders and professionals. Now, the reason for this training is that Africanus has done a lot of work and is still doing a lot of work around neurodiversity awareness. And what we want to do is to empower community leaders and professionals to understand the cultural aspects of neurodiversity awareness, so that we're better able to support the children and young people in our care and in our communities, especially taking into account the cultural perspectives and the minority ethnic communities and their unique experiences. So please, we invite you to take part in this. You can scan the code to be a part of the conversation and register. The training is going to be for 4 weeks, starting from the 3rd of April. So there's still time to register, and it's going to happen every Thursday in April from 7:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. UK time. So we hope that you can engage with this as well, just to build capacity around neurodiversity awareness. We also provide support through this weekly drop-in session for parents. Susie, who you've heard from today, is part of that team. And we have Dr. Vivian Okoye, who's our neurodiversity and inclusion lead. We also have Blessing, who is an international dyslexia coach. And we have Alice, who's a chartered education psychologist and SEN practitioner. And the idea behind this, it's every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. It's just 30 minutes, but it's an opportunity for you to just come in, and if you have any questions around neurodiversity, support for parents, for families, for young people, they're there to listen and provide signposting to relevant services. Alice specifically has expertise around dealing with the school and educational system. So she's able to advise on questions around how to navigate that diagnosis, how to engage with schools to provide the needed support for young people around neurodiversity. So please spread the word. If you're not in need of this kind of advice, there may be someone in your community who needs the support, who needs the advice. Please spread the word, and we'll be more than happy to provide that support that's needed and the signposting to anyone who attends. The other thing I want to mention is that we also have coming up in April a personality talk and parents group launch. And the idea behind this is for parents to be able to understand the ways in which they can support the children and young people in their care to deal with these issues around identity formation, but also personality formation. So there's going to be a support network on the back of this. We're going to have experts coming in. We'll have parent workshops, a fun time for everyone who's involved. So the launch is going to be happening on the 5th of April, and it's happening in Leeds at the Bridge Community Church. So if you're in or around Leeds, it's an in-person event. Please save the date and would love to have you there. The link is there to register. Please register and join us, because it does promise to be the start of yet another really impactful network, which Africanus is very glad to be able to convene. The other thing I want to announce is that we're hiring a community engagement officer, and there's still a few days left. I think the deadline for applications is the 30th of March. This is a paid part-time opportunity based in Bradford, but the idea is that this person will also be working with the NHS Bradford District Care to be able to support Black minority ethnic communities in Bradford, but also widely around the Yorkshire area. So the issues, the main things we want to be covering are around parental support, mental health support, and all the details and the information pack for the role are available online. Please spread the word. And we're looking to have more applications coming as much as possible by the deadline, so that we're able to pick people who can really support us through this journey, through the community engagement role in Bradford. And I think those are the main things I have to announce. Other than that, I want to say thank you very much for being here. We are on social media. So Africanus is very active. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and X or Twitter. Please join us, follow us, because that's where you get updates about our programming and upcoming activities. All of the details for today's program will be on the website as well. So we look forward to engaging with you through our social media platforms. And we hope that you've shared your feedback with us for today's session. And if there's anything else you'd want us to do, let us know. We're really, really, really grateful for being here with you, with us today. We really enjoy your company, and we hope that as we go forward, today's session has empowered us even further to be able to live, connect, and thrive. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you next time.